Hey guys, I'm in the Social Studies Brain Book today, and there were some things you should have already glued in, so make sure you've checked the posts above. So we are continuing on with our story, our history. Of course, we had the colonies coming in at the beginning, and we talked about there were some other folks besides the British colonies, that we had the French and the Spanish moving in. And we talked last week about when you have folks coming together, oftentimes you have some cooperation, but you also end up with some conflict. And we had conflict with the Native Americans last week. But here we see, as history moves forward, we are going to have conflict with other European countries. The British are going to have conflict with the French. And so I've titled this The Causes of the French and Indian War. And that's a bit of a misnomer. The war was not between the French and the Indians. The war was between the French and the British. It just so happens that the Indians sided with the French. So let's read on page 11, where I glued this in. It says confusing land claims. Today, countries in North America are unlikely to argue over who owns a certain area of land. But during the 1700s, it was a lot more confusing. Did a country own land simply because their explorer got there first? If so, how far did they have a right for their claim to extend? Could you hold onto your claim even if you didn't occupy the land? Which means if nobody was living there, could you say it was yours? And what about the American Indians, the Native Americans? After all, they were here first. So this area, this striped area on the map, is what's known as disputed territory, meaning no one really knows who owns it. The green is claimed by France, and the kind of brown color over here is claimed by Britain. And this territory has the Mississippi River running along it and the Ohio River. So it's a very rich land. Not necessarily rich like gold, but it has fertile land for farming, meaning you can grow lots of crops. And if you can grow crops, you can sell crops. If you can grow cotton, if you can grow tobacco, if you can grow indigo, if you can grow corn, you can sell it. Plenty of animals for hunting. Remember, those furs bring a lot of money back in Europe, and other abundant natural resources. So both the British and the French and the Spanish wanted this territory because the control of the land meant power and profit. Profit is money. Okay? So the French, to try and stake their claim, start building forts all along this territory. Well, when the British hear about this, they're not too happy about it because they want ownership of that land as well. Also, their colonies are right here. Their people are right here. They're not too keen on forts being built near their homes. A fort is usually a home where soldiers would live. A fort is not usually a friendly, peaceful thing to build. So the British aren't too happy about that. So the British send a young soldier by the name of George Washington to go to the French and tell them, you need to take a hike. So I hope you've already cut out page 14. So George Washington, you are correct, he later became our first president, but this was early. This is early on in our history. This is before we were the United States. This is before we were a country. George is a British officer, and he makes his way into the territory and visits the French fort and delivers the message that they need to leave. Well, the French officer there is like, oh no, you need to speak to the other leaders. So George ends up going up and down the Mississippi River, going all the way up into Canada, into the Quebec area. And along the way, he maps where he walks, and he marks on the map every fort that he comes across. Now, if you think about if you might be getting into a battle with someone, would you want to know where their forts are? Would you want to know where they're hiding? Absolutely. What George Washington brings back to the British is invaluable to them, meaning that it is the best thing he could have brought back. Because eventually the French say, we're not going anywhere, and the British decide, well, then it's war. Okay? In the meantime, the colonists that live in this area, have homes in this area, they're like, guys, we got to have a plan. We're about to have all out war here. So on the next page, we're going to take some notes about the Albany Plan. Okay. The Albany Congress and Plan. Congress, you're going to see that word a lot this year. Whenever you see the word Congress, it means a group of people have gotten together to talk and discuss and to make a plan. So a Congress is a group of people. This group of people that got together became known as the Albany Congress because they met in a town called Albany in New York. So kind of making an illustrated timeline. War is coming. Between Britain and France. Colonies, prepare. So I'm kind of making that like a banner. Hear ye, hear ye. And so, Albany Congress, a group of delegates, meets from the different colonies. In 1754. I find illustrations help, so I'm going to draw me some little stick figures, some little dudes. All right, so here's my Congress, my group of guys meeting. And yes, I'm sorry, ladies, it would have been guys at the time. It would have been white landowners. And we'll talk more about that as we move forward in our story, our history. Okay, so the Albany Congress meets. And at this meeting, we have one little guy, Ben Franklin. Maybe you've heard of Benjamin Franklin. Well, he comes up with a plan that pretty much says, hey, we should join together. I mean, if you think about it, if there was a bully on the playground bullying one kid, he wouldn't stand much of a chance. But if that one kid was an entire classroom, say 20 kids, that bully might leave him alone. So Ben Franklin says, hey guys, instead of us being separate colonies, because up until this point in time, all the colonies kind of had their own separate government. They kind of did their own thing. Georgia did what it wanted to do. New York did what it wanted to do. But Ben Franklin says, guys, if we join together, we're going to be really tough. We're going to be hard to beat. We should be joining together. Okay? So my little friend right here is Ben Franklin. So his plan becomes known as the Albany Plan of Union. Union means coming together. And so the Albany Plan called for a unified colonial government, meaning that all of the colonies would come together under one government instead of separate entities, separate states, separate colonies, separate governments. So I'll give you a moment. If anytime you need to pause, if I'm going too fast, you may pause the video. Okay? Well, you have to understand that this was a radical, crazy idea for the time because Ben Franklin is not a king. The dudes at the Albany Congress are not royalty. And here they are talking about governing themselves, ruling themselves. And that becomes very unpopular. The British, which is who currently owns the colonies at this time in our history, they did not like this idea because they are ruled by a king. And the king is the one who makes the rules. It wasn't very popular to think that a common man like Ben Franklin could possibly come up with ruling themselves. So I'm going to draw some British. The British. Hey guys, you're British. Have some fun. If they join together, they will be too powerful, is what the British king and government thought. And then we've got the colonists here. I mean, they're the ones in the New World worried about war coming. Hey guys, we're colonists. What's up? Woo. Alrighty. If we don't fight together, we'll die. On page 16, there is a picture that I want you to cut out and put right here in your notes with me. This picture is a political cartoon. That means it's a drawing that would have been seen in a newspaper or a pamphlet that folks would have handed out and shared. Remember, they didn't have internet, they didn't have cell phones, so their news came from the paper. And this political cartoon had a message. And if you look at it, this is a snake. It's actually a rattlesnake. Ben Franklin chose that on purpose because he wanted to choose something that was only found here in America. He also wanted to choose something that gave warning. He's saying, if you mess with us, we'll give warning. However, we have a very powerful poisonous bite. So if you decide you want to fight us, be careful, we'll warn you, but we will bite. In each section of the snake, we have the New England colonies, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. And he was trying to say if we keep all these colonies separate, the snake or our country or all of us will die. But if we join together, we'll be a powerful foe, a powerful predator. So the idea is join or die. And this would have run in the newspapers, and people at home would have seen this picture, and they would have gotten that idea of, oh, if we don't come together, it's like cutting a snake into pieces. But if we join together, we will be a powerful, powerful force to protect ourselves. Alrighty, that, my friends, is the Albany Plan.